On the afternoon of May 21st, 1974, a 39-year-old man named Pilar Gomez walked through a forest in Argentina. In his hand was a machete and an axe. He reached this huge tree and got ready to chop it down. He looked up and he noticed these very deep claw marks. Now, at first he thought, oh, that's gotta be a bear's claw marks. But the more he looked at it, the more he realized that would have been an enormous bear. I mean, these are deep and wide claw marks. Pilar was a professional lumberjack. His cabin was only a few yards away, and his neighbors were miles away. He didn't have a phone or a car. According to local legend, this particular forest was effectively haunted. There were these apparent unnatural huge creatures that roamed this forest and would prey on people like Pilar. Pilar didn't believe in any of that nonsense. He knew this has to be a bear. And so Pilar just went ahead and began cutting this tree down. And right as this tree smashed into the ground, he heard this horrible growling noise, but there was nothing there. He just continued to chop this tree into smaller pieces, and then he would carry those pieces right over to his cabin, and he stacked up this huge pile of lumber right beside the side of his cabin. At this point, it was getting dark outside and it was time for dinner. Pilar would eat his dinner outside. He had this table, and then just beyond the table was this wood stove. And then he sat down at the table, waiting for his food to be done. He suddenly realized that the forest was actually silent. And Pilar knew that the only time the forest got this way was if there was some big predator around. And so Pilar stood up and he walked towards his cabin when he remembered he had left the stove on with the stew on top. And as quick as he could, he walked out to the stove, he shut the vents in the stove, and he was about to grab the stew when something really powerful struck him in the back. He looked down and he saw this massive furry arm with sharp claws reaching around him, pulling at his midsection. It was the bear. But the second he saw the bear, he realized it wasn't a bear. And instinctively, he knew he just had to run and began sprinting towards that lumber pile he had cut up before right next to his cabin. And then he felt another explosion on the side of his head, kept going up the lumber pile, and he clambered onto the roof of his cabin. But when he looked out, this thing was just gone. He reached up and he felt the side of his head, and his ear was missing. Pilar would remain on the roof of his cabin all night. And then finally in the morning, when the sun began to come up, so he climbed off the roof, and then he ran about a mile to the nearest building, which was this woodworking shop. They didn't need to be told that he needed to go to the hospital. They just instinctively put him in the car and drove him there. After Pilar was stabilized, the police showed up to interview him, and Pilar would tell them the story. It was at least 6 feet tall, it was covered in black hair, had sharp claws. I mean, it was every bit a bear, except its face. It was a human face. And the officer said, that can't be true. And ultimately, this went down as simply a bear attack. Since the attack on Pilar, there have been at least 30 people who have come forward to say they either saw or were attacked by this bear-like creature with a human face in that forest in Argentina. Sightings are so common that locals even came up with a name for this creature. They call it the Ucumar, and to this day, nobody has any idea who or what it is.